The compact crossover segment is one of the most populated segments in the Indian car market. But what if you want a compact crossover to stand out in a crowd? What if you want a car that packs in the performance as well as the features? Then the Hyundai Venue N Line should be on your shortlist. But now there's an all-new offering from the house of Toyota, and it is this. This car is based on the Maruti Fronx. It is called the Toyota Urban Cruiser Taisor, and in this video, I'm going to tell you whether you should pick the Toyota Urban Cruiser Taisor or the Hyundai Venue N Line. First things first, let's talk about their design. Now, I really like the way the Toyota Taisor has shaped up. In fact, Toyota designers have done a great job in integrating a Toyota face into what is essentially a Maruti Fronx. Now, that aside, the car does look handsome. It does have a sloping roofline, but there's no two ways about it. It looks like a jacked up hatchback. But if you want something that looks a bit more SUV, then it is the Venue N Line that might just appeal to you. Now, the Alcazar-like big chunky grille, its upright posture, and the red highlights all around, they certainly make it feel a bit more special and add some character to this compact crossover. Standing side by side is the Venue's taller stature that makes it appear like the larger car. However, in terms of length, width and wheelbase, both are millimeters within each other. Now let's see what they're like on the inside. The first thing you'll notice when you get in is that the driving position in general feels more like a hatchback than an SUV. You're seated quite low, the dashboard protrudes in quite a bit to the cabin, and this layered dashboard with the freestanding touchscreen, I mean, it sort of looks sporty. That said, these seats are nice and broad and they are quite supportive, although the cushioning is on the softer side. For shorter drives, the soft cushioning is really comfortable, but on a longer drive, you might experience some body ache while seated here. Moving to the back seat, as you can see, space here is plenty. I'm 5 feet 9 inches tall. This seat is set to my driving position and I have enough knee room and a lot more foot room. Headroom for me is fine, but anyone taller than me could find headroom in short supply. The seat is nice and supportive, but what I didn't like is the fact that this seat doesn't come with load sensors. So even when someone's not sitting here, you'll have to fasten the seat belts, else you'll hear the seatbelt reminder for 90 seconds at the start of every journey. The moment you step into the Venue N Line after the Taisor, it's such a huge difference. The dashboard in the Venue is pushed all the way to the front, and in general, the glass area is much greater than in the Taisor. So the sense of space here is better. That aside, what I really like is the end steering. It feels very sporty to hold thanks to this perforated leather, as well as the neat paddle shifters behind, which operate with a really satisfying click. What I also like is the gear selector, which feels very nice to operate. However, I'm not too sure about the remaining red highlights scattered across the interior. Well, that's not to my taste at least. That aside, I like the driving position. It's more raised compared to the Taisor, so you get a more commanding view of the road, a more SUV-esque driving position. You can see the edges of the bonnet. The seat has electric adjustment fore and aft, as well as for the recline, although the steering does not adjust for reach like it does in the Taisor. In this company, it's the Venue's backseat that you sit onto rather than into. So this is a more chair-like position. Now that said, space here too is plenty. In fact, there's a lot more headroom than in the Taisor. And in general, the sense of space here is better than the Taisor, thanks to the massive greenhouse all around. What's also nice is that the Venue comes with an armrest, and you can also recline the backrest for added comfort. One thing that's missing in the Venue though is a dedicated adjustable headrest for the middle passenger, as well as a proper 3-point seat belt for the middle passenger. On paper, the Venue has the larger boot. However, the more reclined back seat is a bit of a hindrance while stacking luggage. Both offer a 60-40 split option. Features unique to the N6 variant of the Venue N Line are sunroof, dash camera, all-wheel disc brakes, and drive modes. The Taisor, on the other hand, packs in a 360-degree camera, wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, heads-up display, and an auto-dimming inside mirror. As mentioned at the start of this comparison, both these cars have a slightly sportier side to them. And I know what you're thinking, a 1-litre turbo petrol, now how can I call that a sporty engine, isn't it? However, you'll be surprised with the amount of punch these modern turbo petrols pack in. In fact, this 1-litre booster jet that I'm driving here today is one of the nicer, if not the nicest, small capacity turbo petrol engines in this segment. And in this company, compared to the Venue, it is the more responsive engine, it is the smoother engine, and it is also the freer revving engine. And complementing this engine is the 6-speed torque converter automatic. Now this gearbox really masks whatever little of the turbo lag this engine has to offer. You get paddle shifters too with this 6-speed torque converter, and the gearbox is quite obedient to your inputs. In fact, if you are driving in manual mode and you don't upshift to a higher gear, this car will not do it for you. It gives you full manual control. And that's something driving enthusiasts will truly appreciate. It has a 3-cylinder thrum to it, but it does sound quite nice and quite sporty. The Taisor's low-speed ride is a bit on the busier side, although I must admit that it is the more absorbent car in this company. But where it truly shines is at high speeds, where it rides flat and composed in comparison to the Venue. Now, it does take corners quite nicely, and the steering does weigh up a fair bit. Of course, it's not too sharp, and of course, there's not much feel or feedback on offer, but for the most part, you won't have a reason to complain. What I also like is the brake pedal feel. Now, this doesn't get rear disc brakes like the Venue does. However, there are no complaints with its stopping power whatsoever. And here's what the Venue N Line feels like. Powering this Venue is a 120 horsepower 1-litre turbo petrol engine. It's a 3-cylinder unit, but refinement in general is quite good. But not everything's perfect with the Hyundai Venue N Line. For starters, at low speeds, especially when you're driving in stop-go conditions, you can feel a bit of lag from this engine. And even the gearbox is not the most responsive. So that, coupled with the engine's lag, yeah, it can feel a bit annoying to drive at low speeds. However, once the engine is on the boil, there's absolutely no problem, and there's a healthy serving of torque all throughout. In fact, this engine revs higher than the Toyota Taisors. Helping matters a bit are the drive modes in the Venue, which are not available in the Taisor. So you have Eco, Normal, and Sport. Of course, Sport is the slightly sportier setting, as its name suggests, so the throttle response sharpens a bit. The gearbox holds onto the gears a bit longer, and it also downshifts a little quicker than it would normally do in normal or eco modes. On a winding section of road, you'd use the paddle shifters a lot more often, as the gearbox doesn't feel as intuitive or as responsive as the Taisors. We've timed both the cars as well, and in our tests, the Toyota Taisor was slightly quicker than the Hyundai Venue in a sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. For the N Line, Hyundai has tweaked the suspension a little bit. So its damping force is greater than the standard Venues by around 30%. And as a result, the car feels a little stiffer, a little tighter than the regular Venue. And while neither of these two cars have a really absorbent or a compliant ride, uh, the Venues feels particularly busy at low speeds, and even at high speeds, you can feel a lot of vertical movement. All right, it's time to declare a winner. Let's start with the Hyundai Venue N Line first. Now, this is the car that feels the more SUV in this comparison on account of its raised stance as well as its upright seating. It is also the Venue N Line that feels more special on account of all the cosmetic upgrades as well as in vogue features like a sunroof, which the Taisor misses out on. However, the Toyota Taisor has a lot to offer. For starters, it has the smoother engine, which offers better performance. Its gearbox is better tuned. Its ride quality is more supple. It's a fun handler, and in summary, it is the nicer car to drive. And it's for that reason the Toyota Urban Cruiser Taisor wins this comparison test.